Starting. We're broadcasting now, so
Woo!
it is. We are live.
Yeah, that was my live party parrot.
Woo!
Yeah.
All right, man. So here we are. It is a broadcast, a launch cast for Stop, Drop, and Design. That's what this is. So the broadcast today is to explain to you why we've started this project, or movement rather, and what components of it are, what we're kind of expecting to get out of it. And we haven't really received any questions, so it would be to answer questions if those existed. But maybe they'll come.
We were perfectly clear in everything we wrote. No questions.
So one question I did get was, well, why don't we...
Should we introduce ourselves, maybe?
Tell everyone about who we are.
Yeah, maybe. So why don't you go first, Poppe?
Okay. So I'm Stephanie Poppe. I go by Poppe, for many reasons. Just call me Poppe. And so I am a user experience designer for an agency called Level Up Development in Indianapolis, Indiana. I've been a practicing designer for, I don't know, does grad school count? I mean, I was doing internships in grad school. I was working while I was in grad school, so I was practicing design at the same time. So I'm gonna say 5 years.
I like to think of grad school as kind of an apprenticeship. So I kind of count it. But.
Right. Yeah. I learned a lot then. And so I've done a myriad of different things. I'm also an instructor, not for the circus, but just in general, it's just circ arts. So that enlightens me on a lot of other things. But yeah, mostly UX designer and researcher. I lead the research here at the agency I work for, and Gabe and I met in grad school, so now it's time for Gabe to tell us about who he is. Where are you, Gabe?
Yeah. So I'm Gabe Persons. I am currently, as of 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, an experienced design researcher at Lifetime Fitness. Woo! Yeah, finally have my first usability test coming up here, so we'll see how that goes. But also my glasses are glaring like crazy, so I'll take those off. Previously I worked at a logistics company for a couple of years as a designer, and I also spent a year working in the game industry as a researcher. So yeah, Poppe said, we met each other in grad school. She was actually I don't know if I directly worked with you, but you were one of our mentors, I believe. Weren't you? Yeah. One of my second year mentors. I didn't get to work with her, which may or may not be a good thing. But
Gabe.
I'm just saying, if you give me a bad grade, I might not have helped out with this whole movement.
I don't give a lot. It takes a lot for somebody to get a bad grade from me. I'm like, you didn't try. Did you learn anything? Did you listen?
I gave out D's and D like a madman. So.
Oh man. Even when I teach, like I said, I teach kids. I'm gonna start teaching design workshop to teenagers again. I do not give bad grades. When I was in AI, I didn't give bad grades unless they really earned it. Mm-hmm. Guys, you have to try real hard.
I'm a pretty harsh grader myself, so I don't give out very many high grades. But
I'm critical. I'm a critical person, but I don't like to crush them unless they need it.
It builds character.
I didn't even go through my history or whatever. It's fine. I've done a lot of different things, but it's always been, as a designer, I've done Yeah.
Yep.
So if you guys will look at my LinkedIn, whatever, I don't care. It's there. So how Stop, Drop, and Design got started.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my master's thesis, like our capstone, on the flow arts, and I ended up working for the Flow Arts Institute, where I built their social presence, and I became the creative director, blah, blah, blah. But through this, I had to observe, and as a good user researcher, is understanding all of the nuances of their online interaction, because that was where I was focused. There was an emergent practice that came out of this community of the flow arts, which is cool. You can look it up. But it's called Stop, Drop, and Spin, because like the act of like you're spinning them in circles and stuff. But the reason why it happened was because everyone was dispersed around the country, the world. People would meet at events, much like designers meet at conferences and whatnot. And then they go into their hometown and they do their life things. But in many cases, they would be the only person working with a specific type of apparatus. Like maybe a mini hoop versus a big hoop, or like different types of toys, right? And so people wanted to stay connected, and they did the Stop, Drop, and Spin. It was on Instagram. And while I was at Midwest UX this year, which is a fabulous conference, I just started to think. I was really inspired by all of the movements, and I was just thinking about, what if we did something like this for design? Like, designers are distributed. It's going to be different, right? Like, we don't we don't one object. We play with ideas and concepts, and then we create things out of it. But what if we could do that for the design community and create a community of practice? I've also been thinking about concepts like playfulness in work and collaboration, and what that means. And coming from the circus community, from flow arts, they're called play professionals, right? And so I was thinking, well, what if we played with one another, like in this informal environment? Talking through with a lot of my colleagues about this idea, that maybe the premise for Stop, Drop, and Design shouldn't be just design thinking. Stop, drop, and design. Solve the world's problems. It should take more of a critical approach. Mm-hmm. So then we started to think about that. So Stop, Drop, and Design, that's the history of kind of how it got started. It was just this kind of organic thing. And Gabe expressed interest, so I reached out to him to me, and it is what it is now because of our collaboration. And so we really want to build a distributed community of practice, using design thinking principles with a critical approach to the world's problems, or whatever, our opportunity spaces. So that's my take on it. Gabe, you want to chat for a bit?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I originally got interested because, Poppe kind of mentioned her journey through, her thesis and how that kind of led up to this space. And, my graduate work focused on building common ground between people of disparate cultures. And I'm also really big into accessibility design. So basically, creating ease of access in design is always really important to me. And so I thought this sounded like a really fascinating way of not only, bringing us together as designers, but also because a goal of this is for teams to kind of document their process and talk about it and make these public posts to maybe make it more accessible to other people as well. Because I think a lot of what non-designers will see about design might just be the end products, maybe an occasional news article. And then you have this whole set of, industry posts that maybe don't make as much sense to people, or, leave them wondering, well, how does this actually get put into practice? And so that was a big draw for me here, is like we can kind of open ourselves up, and, by allowing not just UX designers, but people from all sorts of different kind of designerly disciplines to get in play, it makes for a much more inclusive space. So it was something I was very immediately interested in, although Poppe is definitely the brains behind it, and the kind of the social media queen, given that I barely had a Twitter account when we started this. So I'm of no help there.
No way. You were so helpful. Of the more scholarly work for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good segue into like kind of the whole point, right? Like, because a lot of people ask, what's the point? What's the point? Like, what's my incentive for doing this? Guys, this is an intellectual exercise. It's just it's an experiment to see if we can do this. Some of the goals were to, one, create this community of practice, to practice critical design thinking. So not trying to, like, we solve problems as designers, like that's what we do every day. But it's usually for somebody else. It's never just kind of for curiosity. And sometimes it is, but it's much harder to do without a kind of a push. So this is meant to be part of that push. And then secondarily, the hope is that people will publish their results Commons under the Creative Commons license, so that tackling these bigger problem spaces and people, and we have more people involved and more people around the world looking at a particular space with a critical eye, and not trying to solve for the problem, but to try to understand and current perceptions of this space, to then maybe shift a perspective or to bring awareness to a particular perspective within a domain. That field work and that research and those insights, and like, you can guard your designs, but at least like share the process with people, because they're going to come up with different directions than you. But through sharing the research and the field work, people that are tackling these important problem spaces could have an open library to access from many different locations around the world. So it does have kind of like this lofty aspiration of being global, of being open. But that's why I started with a manifesto. Like, that was the first thing I wrote, was like, these are our principles.
Mm-hmm.
and one of those things, I mean, it's taken a few different forms, and it is what it is now, but a lot of it started with like, Medium is great. Like, we're on Medium. You're going to publish your results on Medium, on our publication. And again, these avenues that we're using are to help you as designers too. So we're like, so that you're on these places where people are paying attention and people are listening and people are having conversations. So Twitter and Medium, that's what it is for technology and design right now. So be there. But Medium is great because people are talking about a lot of nuances with design, a lot of different things concerning design, but it's never really in, like, it rarely is it in context, and a lot of it is just a lot of talk, right? One of our principles is that we believe in actually doing and showing the work, so that people have more insight into how to do the work. Design has really guarded this. I mean, like, it's kind of like the keystone of the profession, is like, is this tool set to be able to do this kind of work and think critically and whatnot. But it's a more important problem, I think, to be able to have access to these skills as we have more informal training methods for designers, people that are working as professional designers that don't have the same kind of academic insight as some of us do, which is fine. But I don't care how you to be well equipped to think critically, to understand systems, and to do good work for people that works for people, right? Instead of just designing for the next flashy thing. Like, that's my purpose.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, I think a lot of people go into design because it, kind of the way it's talked about and sometimes presented, for an outsider seems like this profession where you can, like, oh, I can really like make the world a better place because, a lot of times, or like have a lot of broad reach and impact, because a lot of what you would hear in, the news in some fashion as a non-designer would be just like really big, releases or big things that happen. But, kind of like you talked about earlier, a lot of what you end up doing is just solving problems. And, as with probably any industry, the reality of the work is, often much different. I mean, you go in and realize, sometimes it's not quite as glamorous as I thought. I'm going to spend the next 12 months working on a business intelligence tool or something like that. And that's not to knock that activity by any means. I mean, that's what I was doing in my last job, was just analytic stuff. But I think this presents a cool opportunity for people to really kind of stretch their muscles in, whatever areas interest them, and avenues you very often wouldn't get to, go down if you, as a professional. And, and who knows where it could end up. I mean, it could actually end up being something that's made. I mean, I remember when we first started, Poppe and I talked about a story of, there was a woman, I believe, I think it was in California, who just realized that the signage for parking was really shitty out there. It was just indecipherable. It was like a 2-foot piece of metal with all these different instructions. And she just was like, I mean, this isn't quite.
Atlanta.
Yeah. And there we go. And this isn't quite necessarily critical design per se, but it was one of those things where she just decided on her own time, like, I'm going to make a new sign, and presented it to the city, and they started implementing it. So, there's nothing to stop anyone from taking this and actually, presenting it to some organization that might find some use for it. And that's partly why we've kind of, as our first prompt, and I'm sure as our next few prompts, we're choosing much more kind of public-facing issues.
Yeah, we wanted, especially starting out, like, we wanted these to be really approachable and really general. But the end goal is to really try to tackle some of these bigger problem spaces, and then provide people with to continue the work if they want. So that's why, like, you can guard your designs, guys. That's fine. Like, that can be your intellectual property. But again, like, sharing the research and the work will be really valuable for a lot of people. Gabe mentioned that, like, we want this to be an exercise to flex some of these skills and these muscles you don't get to normally exercise in your day-to-day job for various reasons. Some of us might be primarily user researchers or UI designers. Some might be developers, but these are all skills that we can practice, and it's an opportunity to get everyone out and talk to real people.
Yep.
Something you don't always get to do with all of your projects is to do the field work. So this is really meant as a way to collaborate across geographic locations, to do field work independently, and then come together and share your insights, find the commonalities, to really understand a space. So with line design, to be fully transparent, we started this project thinking like we could totally get this out in 2 weeks, and we were going to do it before Black Friday because we're citizens and Black Friday is like this big thing here. And people wait in lines and it's crazy. And so that's kind of where we got started with this first prompt. But Q design in general is much broader than just Black Friday, and I'm really happy with the direction we took. We took some more time to really vet the prompt and solidify the manifesto, so that we had a solid foundation to move forward and to build from, which is great. I'm really happy with where we are. Please read the manifesto. I don't need to like verbally, guys, but it has also our code of ethics, things that we expect from the community. But I think more importantly than talking about Q design at this juncture, about what we mean when we say critical design. So Gabe's done a lot of the legwork on this, so I'll let him kind of give a synopsis of critical design, speculative design, kind of where we're expecting people or hoping people take this and use the approach.
So critical design, I mean, there's a lot of terms that get kind of pushed around in the general converse, that the kind of the critical discursive space, critical design, design fiction, speculative design, that, I mean, when you actually dig into them, they might all sound very similar, but they do mean particular things. And if you end up digging into some of the literature, on your own time, you'll find this out as well. But critical design is, it's basically, the idea is when you're working on design, the purpose of it is not to solve a problem, but to kind of, as Poppe said a few times, question the status quo, get people talking about some space. So, as an example, during graduate school, I did a project where I was critiquing a method of research that I thought it was a method of research that was essentially used to study unconscious bias against different skin color, but actually I felt like could reinforce some of the biases. And so I wasn't trying to, I designed this whole new method that would basically, force you to come into conversation with people of different skin color. And the point was not to present to like the research community, here, I've solved this issue, here's a method you all need to use. But the point was to ask questions about, research practices, like what are we actually doing? How careful are we actually being with people that come in and participate in these things? And just to really have a conversation. And that's not to say that the critical design can't be practical. It is of this kind of discursive space. It's one of the more grounded kind of forms, in opposition to something like speculative design, which is extremely future facing. And
right, which is not to say that we don't want to encourage people to do speculative design, but that's not really. But things like speculative design and design fiction are more imaginative, but we'd like to see things in the real world, which is why we chose critical design, because you can put it out there, no matter the form, and see what happens.
And and I think importantly too, ultimately, like, critical design isn't a specific methodology per se. It's more of an attitude, and kind of a way of approaching a problem. But the reason we're making the distinction is that what we're hoping people do is, something like speculative design is often geared towards critiquing the practice of design itself. And I can imagine there might be prompts that people do end up doing that kind of hit on that. But, critical design really is about challenging the role that like products or systems that we interact with play in everyday life. Again, it's very grounded in kind of the products and systems we, live with, and as opposed to just being, questioning our own practices.
It's grounded in the now.
Yep.
Like critical design grounds itself in our everyday reality as we perceive it today. And that doesn't mean it can't be speculative in the end form, and imaginative, whatever your solution comes up with, but it has to be, right?
Yep.
Like it can't, like we can't just propose a solution that's so futurist that like we're not going to say we have a solution with general AI, right? Because general AI is not going to exist for a very long time. Now, if you propose a solution with narrow AI, with things more like chatbots or very simple machine learning that's realizable with the technology today, even if it's realizable in the next year, right? Like that would be more appropriate than something that would be 20.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's kind of the idea I had going with it.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
I thought design fiction would be cool. No, I mean, we're just talking.
Shooting the shit, yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is, again, because, our goal is, we keep talking about making your research and your work accessible to others and kind of opening up the design community, not just to, us as designers, but also to other people to kind of look in. Critical design is great because it's grounded enough that, someone who isn't a designer could come in and look at it, and it gets them asking questions, right? Which is important, because if the only people that it's challenging are other designers, that can kind of defeat the purpose. It's in part meant to open up the conversation to the broader kind of world, and because if you want to induce any kind of change, I mean, you can't just have designers talking to other designers. That's how stuff
right. And we see a lot of that right now. Like I was just going through my Twitter, like who I'm following, all designers, and I was just like, wow, I need to diversify my bubble a little bit more.
Yeah.
So so it's interesting because it's like I have anthropologists and historians and developers and scientists, and designers and design agencies, and that's my feed.
Yep.
So the hope is that by tackling more common spaces, we can bring these conversations and these practices to a more public mindset. We're really lucky, actually, as designers right now. Right now it's 2017, almost 2018. There have been so many stake drivers and leaders before us that have pushed and struggled and clawed at the door to get design a seat at the table, at the decision-making table, and we finally have it. So now that we have a seat at the table, we need to make sure that we're doing good work, and that we not only propose what seems like good solutions, but that we understand the consequences of those solutions, and we understand the systems that they live within and the other systems that those. I think that's another important part of this too, is to really try to do that, right? So with this prompt, with like the first prompt of Q design, waiting in line, whatnot, we urge you to pick your own particular problem space within that, your own domain, because tackling that whole space is just not possible, right? Like it's like that huge box, it's this big box, and we need you to find your own little corner and shine a light on that. So you can pinpoint in, you can drill into your specific problem area, and if that is lines at Disneyland, right? Like that was one of the examples given. What are the tangential that, like, it's not just Disneyland, it could be other theme parks, but do those theme park lines represent maybe lines at really popular museums on release day or something? Like, what are the systems within that one? So like the whole system of the theme park and why lines exist, but then the related spaces that could be across the line, but then some of those things up and down that could also relate.
Mm-hmm.
Example or an explanation of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and and again, like Poppe said, it's ultimately up to you how you do it. But it certainly it could be, like she was saying, it could be determined by picking a physical space that you want to work with. It could be, for example, we had posted a tweet about a woman, an elderly woman, I believe, who had been attacked while waiting in line. And so it could be, you pick a topic area kind of like that, where, okay, we're going to address safety while waiting in line or something like that. Again, it's up to you. And this is part of kind of flexing the muscles, is that I think one of the things that happens when you get into the field as a professional is that it's very often the case that you're already handed a quite specific problem to address. And so there isn't as much room for you to do your own constraining. And for those of us like me and Poppe who, were lucky enough to be able to kind of get formal training, formal education in this space, we had an opportunity to do that. But, I don't know about you, Poppe, but for me, once grad school was done and I moved into industry, I haven't had very much of that anymore. It's been like, here's a very particular thing you need to go fix. And so now we're hoping that this gives people's brains room to breathe, but also practice kind of that skill of constraining that we always talk about as designers, but maybe don't get to practice quite as much as we want.
Yeah, making the map to the swamp, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And building your own high ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, so that is a really important point, is that we really want you to own it, right? Like this is your project. There's no sponsors. We don't have anything really formal other than our principles that we're imposing on you while doing this project. And you could also say no. I mean, you could also be like, nah, but if you break our code of ethics, we'll like kick you out.
Yeah. Because we definitely want, and we'll get into this in a moment here, how we kind of see this evolving down the road. But we want this to eventually be extremely flexible, where people are giving their own challenges and forming their own groups. But like Poppe said, we also, we do want it to be a safe space, for people. So we have things like a code of ethics and kind of a manifesto to help give some amount of guidance. Because, again, this needs to be a safe space for us practices. What's that?
And we can't just, well, it's just like we needed some kind of boundaries, some kind of framework. Otherwise, it'd be too hard, right? Like, there were reasons why we didn't go with a really detailed design prompt, and we intentionally left it vague. Debated about providing resources. We're like, maybe they should find their own, because we don't want to. The only way that we really want to influence the designers working on these problems, these challenges, is that we want people to do it with a critical lens, to explore and use research methods and go out in the field and practice design thinking with a critical lens. And be open about the process. I mean, those are the real, like, that's kind of it.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's a good segue into talking about, how we see this evolving. So, I mean, Poppe and I felt like to start, yes, we would, to get this going, we would probably I think we were thinking the first few prompts, we would probably come up with some prompts to help people out. We're helping organize groups a little bit. But our hope is, once the community has gained some momentum and has grown, what we'd really like to see is people just giving challenges to, others in their community. Like, hey, I want these 4 people to work on this space, and, challenge each other, because, it shouldn't just live in me and Poppy's hands to determine like what everyone should be doing. And, I think we've seen this starting, as it grows. We imagined that it would probably, people would probably first start with maybe a more localized community, if only because it's easier to meet in person and things like that. But, we're already seeing in the few people that have signed up, we're already seeing some, international presence. I mean, there's a lot of Americans, but there's some people who aren't, and that's really wonderful to see. And we hope that continues, because, I think there's certainly wonderful different perspectives, not only across different types of designers, but I think, you're going to find an aesthetic or a set of practices or a feel with American design, and then I'm sure in other countries there's a very different kind of tone that it takes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we want it to be global so that we can share perspectives lines, right? Like, and even practices across cultural lines. And yeah, so the whole point with the stop, drop, and spin movement was that it was a challenge. So that's why, that's part of where it started, was that maybe we could challenge other designers to take part in a specific prompt or specific area. But starting something up, we had to have more guidelines, because how do we start something without a framework? And even then, we could probably continue having like a monthly or a bi-monthly theme. We would provide additional resources for maybe national or international organizations tackling the same kind of domain, so that we would offer people resources to find, people that live and breathe whatever it is we're designing around, but also an opportunity to continue the work, because that's the end goal. It's like designers have a really unique skill set to tackle big, messy, swampy problems and make sense of it, that many civic organizations could benefit from. And like, not just enterprise, but like so many nonprofits, local community groups, any kind of movement can really benefit from design thinking. So so we encourage everyone to donate their time in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I don't know about you, Gabe. I do.
Yeah. Well, not as much lately outside of this, but I'd like to.
We just started a new job. It's fine.
Yeah. But
enough. Like, we're not. We personally are not involved in this first design prompt because we are the caretakers of the community for you right now.
I think as this grows and we get more people and we kind of figure our shit out, I certainly I think we both would love to be involved. But yeah, for probably the first couple, while we're keeping things organized, we won't be doing them ourselves. So we hope no one has bitter feelings about that. Like, oh, these bastards, they can't even walk the talk.
We can. It's just that we want there to be others to do this with you.
Yeah, right.
So we have to make sure that we market it. We do things like this Launchcast. If you're listening, there's one viewer right now. One.
Are you seeing that on YouTube? Is that how you're seeing that?
I'm seeing that down. Hangouts chat. It says I've got a viewer. Maybe I'm the viewer.
I see two.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I think maybe
because it occurred to me: are we linked to the YouTube channel? But did we actually link to the actual Hangout?
I linked to the thing. No, I hope nobody. I hope there's two. There's two viewers now.
Assuming it's not
Now
us,
there's
but
just one. Someone it was like an accident. They just they're like, oh, sorry, not really. Didn't want this.
yeah.
These people are crazy. Sort of. But no, what was I saying? This one person, whoever watches this, like, please share this with your colleagues. I think would be interested in participating. The deadline to submit is January 14th. That's a significant amount of time. We'll close the call for submissions or call for participation on Friday, December 14th. So you have a full month to work on this space. We understand the holidays are around, but even on New Year's Eve, you could like take a notebook.
While you're waiting
Study
in
whatever
line,
line you're in.
Yeah, while you're waiting in line to get your keg, you can take some notes.
People about the experience of being in line. I mean, like, we're all gonna be doing something like that, right?
Yep.
I hope.
Yep.
So that's, you got time. 15 minutes left scheduled. Was there anything else we really wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think, we've kind of covered a lot of ground. Since I would have said 15 minutes for some Q&A, but
right. I'm gonna go to the thing. I'm now a viewer. Ooh. Oh, I guess I could check the Twitter to see if anyone is tweeting us right now.
yeah,
Because you can join our Slack. You check us out. We're on Twitter and Medium. It's Stop Drop InDesign everywhere. Because it's actually but you can't do an ampersand, like, kind of thing. So it's yeah, nobody's tweeting. This is our first one, so it's fine. But it's not sad. People are listening.
Well, we did have someone who just joined the Slack.
Right. Welcome, Cruzia Camille Vela Cruz.
It's a great name.
We do. So we should maybe shout out and thank the 10 or 11 people that have joined our movement, joined this first round at the very least. So yeah, I'll go through the list of the call for participation. I don't want to just name the people that I know because it seems a little unfair. But we have Michelle Munguia. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your last name, I'm sure. She's a UX researcher from Atlanta. And we have Rotislav. Right, like Atlanta. That's
where
hold
that
one.
Yeah, if she can find the signs and snap a picture and tweet at us, that'd be great.
She could find the signs. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of pictures online. Maybe I should just post the project. And that was a solid, like, design project, but they took a critical eye. So that goes back to, like, critical design doesn't have to be frivolous. It doesn't just have to be art. It can be pragmatic and practical as long as you're exploring the space with a critical lens. We have several resources posted on critical design. Feel free to reach out, but definitely join our Slack. The Slack is where we're gonna have most of our conversation, because we all know that nobody wants their Twitter feed. Like, we don't need that thing popping off. I mean, it'd be great. I'd love it. But I'd prefer our real conversation to happen in the Slack, so that we kind of have an archive and a controlled space. So the next person that signed up was Rotislav Roznoshik. I did take Russian, so we've got some Slavic Slavic pronunciations. Anyway, Rotislav, or RR, on our Slack channel is from Latvia. He looks like he's a full stack UXer. He does UX design, research, and strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Seth Richardson is from Indiana. He's a member of the IXDA here in Indianapolis that I also co-lead. And so thanks, Seth, for joining. Jacqueline Halpern is also from Indianapolis. I work with her. Adam Williams is from our program. He's currently in San Francisco working for IBM. And he is also an all-around designer. I like the strongest skills. In the call for participation, you list like what your strongest skills are, and he like listed all of them.
Well, we also know Adam's full of shit, though, so.
No. I hope he watches this and like
calling him out.
calls you out on that.
Yeah. I didn't like those grades he gave me, so.
Yeah, he's pretty critical. He really likes breaking people down.
Mm-hmm.
Conversation with someone's like, okay, you need to work harder on this.
He did give me good scores in methods, so
good.
I'll forgive him.
Yeah. Cecilia Silvestre is in Oakland, and she is doing user research, some testing, some strategy, storytelling. Cool. She goes by CC. Oh no, that's her friend. In Oakland. We also have CC Shan, who is also in Oakland. Brant Hughes. We have a pretty big stronghold here. Gabe, where are the Minneapolis people? Come on.
I'm sorry. I don't actually. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to reach out to some more people.
Right.
But
we have Elisa Prudhunt from New York. Solid graphic designer, it looks like, with branding, content writing, storytelling. That's awesome. She's like the one. We also have Gozia Machniuska. Okay. Gozia Machniuska. She is in New York City. She also does graphic design, but also UX design, and some front-end dev. So those are the people that have signed up thus far. Thank you so much for on us. And when we close the call for proposal on Friday, December the 14th, we will then pair people up in either 2s or 3s. I think if we don't get anyone else to sign up, we're gonna do it in 2. They're gonna be in pairs. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping we get more people.
Yeah. By the way, it's actually the 15th of December. It's Friday.
The 15th?
Yep.
How many times have I said the 14th? Like
every
several.
time. Every time. You were just so pleased with yourself, I didn't want to interrupt and correct you, but it was the 15th, in fact.
Yes. Congrats.
Yeah.
The 15th. So I'm glad that it's actually an extra day because today's the 11th. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's it. Follow up, right?
Yep.
That's what we got. We thanked our people. We talked a lot about things.
Yeah, about things. Talked a lot about things. Yeah.
No, that's leftover design, guys. I'm sorry. I'm really informal. I'm the weird one. Gabe keeps me in check.
I try. But yeah, so like Poppe said, hit us up on Twitter. Certainly join our Slack channel. We've been posting a lot of, more quotes and resources. I think we're going to probably, continue doing some of that on, posting things to get people the juices flowing and, occasional further resources here and there. But really, at this point, pretty soon here, it's going to be just in your guys' hands. And Poppe and I are looking forward to watching the magic happen and seeing how this goes. But certainly we're going to be available the whole time for support as needed.
Definitely. I'm really looking forward to seeing results come in. You'll just submit, this is an explanation to people. So when we pair people up into teams, hopefully they assign like the one person that's responsible for publishing the results on Medium. And you can list everyone as a co-author in the beginning of the article, and you can tag people's Medium profiles there. So that everyone knows that this was a collaboration. But unfortunately, we can only have one actual publisher. So that's how that works. And then we'll review the submissions. To provide feedback, we will, and then publish them on our publication on Medium. So it's really open, and we hope you enjoy the practice, enjoy the challenge, and tell your friends.
Yep. And keep in mind about the publication. When we talk about editing, it's not like we have a bunch of stringent things we're going to be looking for. I think it's mostly just going to make sure that it's just things like if there is a section maybe that you didn't talk about so much, just encourage, like, hey, would you be interested in adding a bit more about your research process, or things like that.
Right. We just have to have that one gate, just like it's just like the final, like, we've seen it, it's good to go, it's not, or just, we just want to make sure that we're putting everyone's best face forward, and helping everyone the best we can.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thanks, Gabe, for participating. Thanks, our one viewer. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for organizing this. It was a good time, and look forward to seeing how this evolves.
Okay, stopping the broadcast.
All righty.